Hello, everyone. This is Marie Sullivan, and it's 4:30. And since this is a work session, I'm going to call the time on this. And before we move into a call to order, I want to offer that Dr. Fisher and her team have a song for us to think about as we move in today's work sessions. So Dr. Fisher, I know you're on the line, and before I call this to order and call roll, do you have a song to share?
We do. As we were thinking about the monitoring report and how important it is, we thought about the police. Every breath you take, every step you make, we'll be watching you.
Oh, and given this time of COVID, maybe that's also good, every breath we take.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you for setting the stage for us today. So with that, I am going to call to order the February 2, 2021 work session of the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board. I want to announce again that we are live captioning our meetings, so please look in the chat window of our Webex meeting where you will find a link. Please click on that link to open a web page with the live captioning if that's your interest. Today we are going to be provided a report on 2 items. The first one is going to be the 2020 performance monitoring report. We'll have a 30-second break, maybe 1 minute, and then move to a continuation of a discussion on the fiscal year 21-22 budget development update on revenues and expenditures. And so before we move into the content for the meeting, I'm going to call for the record again, on that attendance is mandatory role of board members. I'm going to start, though I don't see her on the participant list, Ms. Munoz, our student trustee. If you're present, please let me know. I'm going to move on. Ms. Bittersmith. I think she has to be unmuted to say whether she's present.
Am I unmuted now? Am I unmuted now? Okay. And if I could stay unmuted, that would be easier. Thank you. I'm here.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Bittersmith. Mrs. McGrath. Mrs. McGrath, are you with us right now? Okay, we'll come back to that. Dr. Narini?
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Present.
Dr. Thor?
Present.
Ms. Wynn?
Present.
And I'll go back to Mrs. McGrath. Elsa, I see her on the list. Can you tell me if she's just muted?
No, I don't show her as being muted at all.
Well, I'll call it as is, and we'll go through the rest of the discussion and see where she can join us. And I don't see Ms. Munoz either. So with that, we have...
I'm here.
Jalissa's here.
There you are. Okay, great. Thank you. And I believe Mrs. McGrath is somewhere, but I will say that we have 6 board members in attendance and our student trustee, Ms. Munoz, present for the current time. So moving on to the 2020 performance monitoring report, Dr. Gonzalez, would you like to take us to the next step here?
Yes, I would. President Sullivan, good afternoon. President Sullivan, members of the board, CEC, and guests that are with us here today. We are pleased to be able to provide you with the performance monitoring report. And again, I want to say thank you for allowing us the extension to ensure that we had a full report. And as I shared with you previously, this one has a new look, feel, and touch to it. And I'm really pleased with the work that's been done by the provost and her team in preparing this, and especially for all of the colleges, faculty, and staff that have made these data happen. So I want to get out in front of that and just say thank you all for the good work that you're about to learn about here. We're going to hear from Dr. Fisher and some members of her team. You'll also hear from some presidents this evening. And then as you described, we'll go into the budget development continuation of our conversation, where hopefully that will be a rich conversation around questions and discussion on our budget. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Fisher.
Thank you, Chancellor, and good evening. We are delighted to present to you the 2020 Board Monitoring Report. Again, as Chancellor mentioned, we are very grateful that we had an extension of time. In past years, we've tried to present the report in November, which means our data sets weren't complete for the entire year. And so for this year, you will see complete data sets, and I think that's much more effective when you're thinking about these data for decision making. So President Sullivan, members of the board, Chancellor Gonzalez, CEC, and guests, you will be looking at the monitoring report. As the Chancellor mentioned, it is very different this year. We've added some trend analysis and disaggregated populations with a focus on our equity gaps. And we've added spotlight segments. And so this evening, rather than simply walk through all of the different metrics, as you may have seen it in the past, just one after the other, we've kind of grouped those together into likes. So leading indicators, completion outcomes, and enrollment, awards, and transfers. And so leading indicators will be presented by Dr. Meredith Warner, who's leading our integrated student support efforts for Guided Pathways, and Dr. Ray Rivera, president at Estrella Mountain Community College. Completion outcomes will be presented by Matt Ashcraft, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Strategy, Research, and Effectiveness, and Dr. Amy Diaz, Interim President at Gateway Community College. And finally, enrollment, awards, and transfers will be presented by Lori Lindenberg, District Director in our Institutional Effectiveness Office, and Dr. Lori Berkwim, Interim President at Mesa Community College. And finally, we'll have a wrap up with a perspective on the equity gaps from Dr. Felicia Ganther, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Meredith Warner to get started with our leading indicators.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. You can actually advance the slide. And one more time. As Dr. Fisher mentioned, I am Meredith Warner, and I work on the Provost's academic and student affairs team. I provide leadership for our collective Guided Pathways work. And of course, I have the great fortune of taking time to briefly share with you the amazing work the colleges have been doing around the leading indicators of student success. But before I get started sharing that data around those leading indicators, I want to draw your attention to the 5th page of the report, which actually shares the location of the dashboard, which houses all of these metrics we're going to talk about. Speaking about these leading indicators as a 10 college grouping is of course one thing, but often the story is within one or two of our colleges themselves. So this report very much shows the aggregated data of all 10 colleges. But I'm going to invite you to spend some time thinking about the individuality of success stories within our data. And it's that disaggregated information that highlights so much of the work we've been doing for the last several years. And I want to recognize the fact that a couple governing board work sessions back, Dr. Thor had specifically asked about our work around Guided Pathways and where we were with that district-wide movement. I assure you, Dr. Thor, the colleges have been working tirelessly to reorganize, repurpose resources, and acclimate to a Guided Pathways model. These leading indicators are actually indicative of all that work. And it's these leading indicators that will actually help us achieve our completion and graduation goals in the coming years, which of course is something that Matt Ashcraft is going to discuss in the next section. There's someone typing, so I'm going to pause for just a second and see if we can't get someone. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the report. As you can see, the needles, and you can look at this slide and notice it, the needles are moving in the right direction when it comes to things like college readiness, college level course completion. This is largely due to the concerted work of the 10 colleges around preparing our students to be ready for our college level coursework in their first year. And that is a major tenet of Guided Pathways. Our Developmental Education Council, under the leaderships of both Dr. Ashley Steek from Mesa and Dr. Rosalind Knight from Rio, they have passionately led teams of faculty and staff across the colleges to find ways to eliminate standardized testing and instead better prepare our students for college coursework. Not only does this save district-wide resources on non-college level coursework, it really saves our students time and money. And you notice, you can see that persistence from fall to spring declined last year. But not all of our colleges suffered a decline. Can you go to the next slide? Colleges like Scottsdale, for instance, a college that has made intentional efforts around the design and implementation of a collaborative retention team, have notably seen an increase in persistence from years prior. And much like Scottsdale, Estrella Mountain has also seen enormous gains around credit momentum. And just to remind all of you, credit momentum refers to those students who take and complete 12 to 15 credit hours each term. Dr. Rivera, would you take a moment to highlight the work at Estrella Mountain for the board?
Yes, thank you, Meredith. It's my pleasure to talk about the EMCC faculty and staff and all the hard work that they've done to help us with this credit momentum data. We know that credit momentum is an important leading metric to monitor, as research indicates students who take and complete at least 12 hours in their first term improve student completion. In fact, over the past 5 years, we have seen a steady decrease in the amount of time students take to complete a degree and certificate at EMCC. Some of the contributing factors include our required orientation and advisement and registration session, or known to us locally as ROAR, since we're the Mountain Lions, are specifically integrated with our field of interest, part of our Guided Pathways implementation for advising sessions. And in these sessions, we recommend a 12 credit first semester schedule relevant to the student selected FOI and degree plan. Additionally, we have one academic advisor assigned to each of the fields of interest, which allows the advisors to focus specifically on their cohort of students and provide a consistent point of contact in the advising department. We also host our annual Student Success Fair, and this is a college-wide workshop that allows students to gain valuable information about graduation and completion while making key connections with faculty, staff, and peers. And on every year, we average about 800 students who participate in this event. So what's in the future for EMCC? Just very quickly, we're currently a pilot institution for Pipeline AZ, a new career assessment tool that integrates career advising into the onboarding and first semester student experience. And this will allow students to make much more informed career and degree decisions early on in their pathway. And finally, EMCC is planning to pilot a mandatory first semester student success course for all new students during the fall 21 semester. This course will emphasize best practices for students' retention and completion. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss EMCC's data and celebrate the hard work of our faculty and staff. Thank you.
That was great, Dr. Rivera. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned earlier, we really want you to take a deep dive into that dashboard, especially when seeking information like our college level course success. So if you keep in mind what I talked about earlier, the newly introduced developmental education models across the colleges that have been able to successfully introduce case management advising, like Rio Salado, have actually seen an increase in college level course success as well. They have an integrated learning management system. And there, the case managers at Rio Salado are uniquely positioned to respond to early indicators of student failure. And they can actually support their students before they're unable to reverse course. There are highlights like these throughout the entire report. Scottsdale, Estrella Mountain, and Rio Salado are only 3 of many. So we all hope you'll take the time to review and celebrate our college's great success stories around leading indicators. I'm now going to hand this off to Matt Ashcraft, who's going to share information about our completion outcomes. Matt?
Thank you, Dr. Warner. I am Matt Ashcraft, and I serve as Associate Vice Chancellor for Strategy, Research, and Effectiveness. And before I begin reviewing our completion outcomes, just a couple things I wanted to mention. Board President Sullivan, last year when we presented on this, you had given us some great feedback that you struggled to understand what the data told us in terms of if we were making progress or not. And that was because of the way we presented at the time. And so your feedback is a big part of the reason that we have presented it differently this year, so we can get a sense for the direction we're headed with each data point. And the other thing I'd like to do is thank the institutional research and effectiveness team at the district office, particularly Lori Lindenberg, who you will hear from in a bit, but also all of her team members who have just done a phenomenal job on this report. So with that, completion outcomes reflect long-term performance of Maricopa students, which are also known as lagging indicators of student success. These lagging indicators, as you heard Meredith indicate, are directly influenced by our leading indicators. Completion and transfer rates are measured at 2, 3, and 6 years. We also measure the median number of years from initial enrollment to completion and the average wages of our completers at 3 years after graduation. The percentage of students completing or transferring after 2 and 6 years is slightly higher than last year. However, at 3 years after graduation, the rate slightly declines. We may be seeing more students choosing a degree or certificate rather than transferring, and we would like to reach out directly to our students to understand if this is the case. That said, our transfer rates do pick back up at the 6-year mark. Now, personally, it took me 5 years to transfer from Mesa Community College to ASU, and I only racked up 50 transfer credits during those 5 years. That's really underwhelming, I know. While I didn't struggle academically, I did have to work full-time, experience schedule changes at work, and was the first in my working poor family to attend college. I am clearly no Tom Hanks, but I can say without a doubt, just like he does, I owe it all to community college. And for me, I actually owe it all to Mesa Community College. And I bring that up to help you understand that there are going to be some of our students that need that extra time for very similar reasons to why I needed it. But for the majority of our students, our goal is to reduce that time to completion. Okay, the shameless plug over. Now on to more of our completion outcomes. So our median years to complete at 4.3 years has remained stable from the prior year, but is slightly down since 2016, and that is a good thing. This is a metric that we want to see decline. One of the primary goals of our guided pathways work is to reduce the time it takes students to complete or transfer. And these lagging indicators will continue to see improvements the more we implement guided pathways. Our graduates' average wages at 3 years after graduation have remained stable. Our graduates earned 105% of the living wage for a family of 4 with 2 working adults in Maricopa County, and 67% of the living wage for a family of 4 with 1 working adult. Our CTE graduates, on the other hand, earn 115% of the living wage for a family of 4 with 2 working adults, and 73% of the living wage for a family of 4 with 1 working adult. Similar to the equity gaps that we see in our leading indicators, as Meredith mentioned, we find notable gaps between minority and non-minority students in time to completion and in average wages. There is also a sizable gap in wages between male and female students. These are unfortunate. And as Meredith mentioned, and I believe Dr. Fisher mentioned, we'll be hearing Ganther in just a moment about we're doing to reduce these gaps and eliminate them, hopefully. So that said, our CTE degrees and certificates perform better than our overall average in wages after completion. And with that, I would like to ask Dr. Amy Diaz, interim president at Gateway Community College, to highlight their programs that have a great earning potential after completion. Dr. Diaz?
Thank you, Matt. Again, my name is Amy Diaz, and I'm the interim president at Gateway Community College. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some additional information about Gateway's career and technical education programs that result in high-paying wages for our graduates. According to a recent survey done by payscale.com, Gateway Community College was ranked as one of the top 50 community colleges for graduate earnings in 2020 of all community college alumni nationally from both public and private not-for-profit colleges. When compared to other community college options, Gateway ranked number 35th on the list with a median salary of just over $72,000 per year and early career pay at about $50,000 for select careers. We're in good company as Glendale Community College was also ranked in the top 50 on that survey. As for Gateway's specific programs, we offer about 125 career and technical education, or CTE, related programs through both our credit hour and our clock hour program offerings that result in our students completing either a certificate or a degree in their field of study. Among those CTE offerings, about 1/3 of them are related to nursing and healthcare. And in most cases, Gateway is the only Maricopa college offering these specific programs, such as physical therapy assistant, nuclear medicine, Spanish medical interpreter, ophthalmic medical assistant, respiratory care, and 5 different nursing programs. Many of these programs also require student completers to take a nationally standardized certification and examination in order to enter the workforce. Almost 50% of our CTE-related programs fall into the applied technology field of interest, ranging from welding to machining to automotive service offered through our credit hour programs and auto body repair offered through clock hour. We also offer the only program in water resources technology with an emphasis in environmental studies. The largest remaining set of program offerings fall into the business, entrepreneurialism, and management field of interest and includes our unique programs such as apprentice meat cutter and court reporting. We're really proud of the fact that we provide so many options for students across the Valley to complete a certificate or a degree in these diverse workforce areas that in turn contribute to the economy in such important ways. All of the programs mentioned have higher than average starting wages. However, there is something else to consider. The majority of these programs were not able to be completely transitioned into an online environment due to COVID because of the skills and competencies that require in-person learning. The in-person component of many of these programs is usually tied to the demonstration of a skill using specialized equipment that is as close to the current industry standard as possible. The fact is that many of these CTE programs are expensive to run and include overhead costs that require Gateway to maintain and or replace equipment and simulation software on a regular basis in order for our graduates to remain competitive in the marketplace. We also have the opportunity to hire content who have made the decision to leave their field in order to teach the next generation of workers who can expect to make an average wage that is well above the living wage. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to say that we are grateful to have the support of the governing board and our colleagues in Maricopa to fill these workforce needs now and into the future. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz, for that spotlight on the work that Gateway's doing and the programs that you offer. I will now transition to Lori Lindenberg, who will review enrollment, awards, and transfers.
Thank you, Matt. I am Lori Lindenberg, and I'm the District Director of Institutional Effectiveness. The final section of metrics in this year's report are considered volume metrics. These metrics are not based on a specific cohort. Instead, these metrics are the count of all students at certain stages in the student life cycle. For example, as you know, we regularly report the head count of students that are enrolled. In this year's report, we have provided a summary of our headcount enrollment, as well as the number of credit hours earned by our students at the end of a term. As you are aware from prior presentations to this board, we have been monitoring our enrollment closely this year due to the impact of COVID-19. And the data provided in this report is very similar to what has been previously provided. However, the data in the section that we haven't had as much opportunity to discuss is the number of students earning awards and transferring. After slight declines each year for the past 4 years, we are happy to report an increase in the number of students earning awards last year. The dashboard provided for this metric will show you that this is primarily due to an increase in Certificate of Completion awards at Rio Salado College. These shorter programs allow us to bring students in our front door and get them quickly through a program that can lead to gainful employment. The momentum from these types of programs can allow us an opportunity to produce an increasing number of graduates. And as mentioned by Matt Ashcraft, our CCLs produce strong wage outcomes for our graduates as well. Our trend for the number of students transferring this year was unsurprisingly a slight decline. I say that this was expected because it maps nearly perfectly with the enrollment decline in years prior. As both Meredith and Matt mentioned, we expect to see a favorable impact on the number of graduates and transfers from our efforts with guided pathways. However, these metrics do tend to track closely with enrollment, so we will be monitoring them in the next few years to see how the pandemic impacts these longer-term measures. Throughout this final section of the report, we also provide the most recent data on our clock hour and non-credit programs. There's tremendous pride in these programs that have produced encouraging results for our students, including the Arizona Advanced Manufacturing Institute at Mesa Community College. I would like to turn this over to Dr. Lori Berquam, Interim President at Mesa Community College, to highlight the great work happening at Mesa with this program. Dr. Berquam.
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, Governing Board. My name is Dr. Lori Berquam, and I am the Interim President at Mesa Community College. I'm really excited to spotlight the Arizona Advanced Manufacturing Institute, affectionately referred to as AZAMI, because they have had an ongoing partnership with Boeing to increase the number of aerospace technicians in the regional workforce pipeline. The cable harness wiring program is delivered as a hybrid 9-day boot camp and includes a portable industry certification, which validates the skills specific to that occupation. In 2019, AZAMI had 211 program completers with 184 placed in their fields. This is a notable achievement, and we're pretty excited about it. It is in direct response to industry needs in our community, and we're happy that we're able to meet that need. The responsiveness to industry continues, and I'm going to let you in on a future idea, and that is the second division, which is being planned using composites with Chandler Gilbert Community College. This is an exciting endeavor, and we're thrilled to be able to participate in this partnership. So stay tuned for more to come. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, President Berquam. Also, throughout the report, we analyze the extent that inequities in outcomes exist in our performance measures. Dr. Felicia Ganther is now going to speak to our efforts to both transparently approach these findings and address them through meaningful change. Dr. Ganther?
Thank you. Thank you very much. President Sullivan, members of the governing board, our interim chancellor Gonzalez, our provost, Dr. Fisher, and to the members of CEC and those who are visiting with us today. I am coming as a representative of some of the work that has occurred over the last 5 years, but also to highlight and showcase the work that is currently being done. Before I talk about that, I do want to say that equity, diversity, and inclusion have elevated its presence in community colleges and universities across the United States since the death of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matters, the Dreamers Initiative. However, I would be remiss if I did not say that for Maricopa community colleges, it shouldn't take a death or any other protest or any effort to bring awareness to these things for us to do the right thing. Helping every student and every family connected to a student who deposits their dreams at the feet of our colleges, looking to us as the door to a better life, that it is the right thing to do to ensure that they have an equitable experience, that there is a sense of belonging, and that they feel that their campus, the faculty and staff, and those support them look like them, come from the same neighborhoods as them, have had similar experiences as them. That is the right thing to do. And so as we embark on elevated experiences, and we embark on new efforts and synergies around supporting all students, we are very happy with the work that is currently going on in our district. We have some institutions who are looking at how to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion in their shared governance process, how they are infusing it in their teaching learning environment, and how they are looking to support students through academic and social support networks. I'm also delighted to highlight South Mountain Community College. South Mountain is small but mighty. President Olson came in with the idea of completion for everyone. And as South Mountain has served the highest number of students of color in our district, they also have the highest number of completion rates of students of color. And it's not that they went out and found a new shiny object to implement, it's that they looked at their strengths and identified ways to support students there on their campus, whether it was through My 360, the Male Empowerment Network, the Women Rising program, or some of their special programs around trades and bilingual nursing. And so I will say that in the monitoring report that you're receiving, you will see glimpse of the work that is being done to support students from all walks of life. But as I presented last semester at the Student Success Conference, if we look at giving everyone an equitable experience, not only will we see those who are doing well do better, but those who know they want to do well and they want to do better, that they too will do better. As an example, if we ensure that our transfer rates are 20% across every student population, this past year, we would have had 250 more Latina females transferring on to the university. Just imagine that number of students who get a baccalaureate degree, who then get a good paying wage job, multiply that times the time that they are in the workforce, and how much funding that generates for our own community, and how it helps them and their families to elevate into the American dream of their choice. And so I will turn it back over to our leaders, and I hope that you will embrace and support the work that we are doing to ensure that every single student's dreams becomes a reality at Maricopa Community College. Thank you.
Well, thank you, team. And Ms. Sullivan, members of the board, would open it up for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher and your team for the presentation today. I know the report is quite comprehensive and there are dashboards and all sorts of things. And I certainly appreciate the stories and the overview that you've given. The questions may need to go further into the data details. So if that's the case, I hope we can put those forward. So board members, what I'm going to do is what I normally do, and that is go through the list asking you for questions or comments. But what I'd like to do as each person asks theirs, if any other board member wants to weigh in on that question or comment or follow up with something else on that particular topic before we get to you individually, please feel free to do that, and I'll do my best to manage that for us. So with that, I'm going to start with you, Ms. Nguyen. Do you have any comments or questions?
I have some comments, and I don't believe I have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you for this report. I like when we look over a 3-year period. Obviously, 2020 2020 is going to affect a lot of our metrics and for some time to come. It's encouraging. I have a personal interest in the cable, wire harness, and the composites. Big fan of Boeing. And I have personally engaged with the Women's Rising program that's at South Mountain, along with the other certificate programs. And what I think I'm hearing in everything that everyone presented is our commitment to really reaching into our community and discovering what the workforce needs are and being responsive to that. And it looks like it's taken on a different personality for each college, but I appreciate Ms. Ganther's passion for that and helping vulnerable, there's someone who's on, helping vulnerable students get connected, but all students get connected to their to some kind of career, I think is wonderful. And I look forward to reading the rest of the report, but I was encouraged by what was said today. So thank you.
Thank you. Along that line, is there any board member who wants to speak to any comment from Ms. Swin and this report? Being none, I'm going to move on. Dr. Thor.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I also want to compliment both the presenters today and everyone who worked on this monitoring report. I found it vastly improved from the monitoring reports that we've received in the past. I found it much more informative and much more understandable and frankly, much more inspiring than what we have received in the past. So congratulations. I do have a question for Dr. Rivera. Dr. Rivera, your mandatory college success course that you'll be implementing, I'm curious to know whether it will be free to students. And if it is not free, will it apply to their degrees and certificates?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Thor, President Sullivan, Dr. Thor. Dr. Thor, that's a really good question. We are currently investigating ways for us to pilot or to have the cost be minimal for those students that we're intending to pilot. The goal is to create possibly a 2-credit CPD course that instills a lot of the college-going behaviors that we know have made students successful. And we believe we can do it with our internal foundation funds, our internal scholarships. So it will be minimal for those students in the pilot, and we're hoping to, at some point, as we implement guided pathways for the district, to be able to make this introductory course mandatory, so therefore it will count towards financial aid, and therefore all students can be able to take it in the future.
Thank you very much. I also have a question about the decline in the rate of transfer. And if I correctly recall what I read in the report, the transfer data reports transfers to Arizona public universities only. And I'm curious as to whether the growth of Grand Canyon University might be impacting these numbers. In other words, that rather than going to a public university, students may be going to Grand Canyon.
President Sullivan, Dr. Thor, Chancellor Gonzalez, I can answer that question. We have 2 different transfer metrics in the report, so I just want to kind of quickly lay a foundation for that. One is the rate.
Would you please identify yourself, because not everyone might recognize your voice, please.
Yes, I'm Lori Lindenberg, District Director of Institutional Effectiveness. Thank you for that reminder. Yes.
Thank you.
We have 2 different transfer metrics in the report. One is a rate at which students transfer. The other is a count of students that are transferring. The rate at which students transfer uses data from the National Student Clearinghouse, which includes all transfer activity happening after their last enrollment with Maricopa Community Colleges. However, we also noted a decline in the number of students transferring, and we do gather that data from the Assist data warehouse that's currently supported by AZ Transfer. And that only includes data from our 4-year public institutions in Arizona. We did look at our rate of transfer to Grand Canyon University, And over the prior year, it did increase slightly, I think about a percentage point. I can get those numbers specifically to you. So that might have contributed somewhat, but we believe the most contributing factor was the tie to the enrollment decline about 5 years prior to where we're seeing this decline in transfers.
Very good. Thank you very much. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comment building on the questions Dr. Thor asked?
President Sullivan?
Yes, Ms. Bittersmith.
Thank you. Actually, Dr. Thor hit on a point I was going to ask in my question, so if I might just do a follow-up to her observation about Grand Canyon, because I noticed in the supplemental data, it talks exactly about that slight uptick, about 1% of the Grand Canyon numbers are increasing, and I wondered if anyone on the team could tell me if that's simply coincidence, or is there a particular program that GCU has implemented that is attracting more of our students, or is it because GCU is doing a better job of recruiting off of our campuses? Just curiosity if that's the factor.
Anyone?
President Sullivan, Chancellor Gonzalez, members of the board. From a data perspective, we can't dig too deeply into the specifics of that transfer question. When we send data to the National Student Clearinghouse and get that data back, we can only see if they have enrolled. We can't necessarily see the program in which that they have enrolled. But to answer that question more specifically, I can check with my team to see if we're able to get more detail on that. I just know that our initial analysis did not include the specifics around transfer. In terms of their recruitment efforts, I'm not aware of those efforts and how they might be impacting us. Just more speaking from the data side of things.
Thank you, President Sullivan. Part of the reason I was asking that question is I know that GCU has expanded and improved their nursing program, and given the potential interest in legislation to allow us to do some nursing degrees from our campuses, if that's successful, understanding that dynamic might be helpful. And I think this would demonstrate the fact that there is a need for more nursing programs in the state of Arizona if that's what's happening. And that would be a useful point of data for us to have as we pursue anything that's happening legislatively. So that was the purpose of my question.
Thank you, Ms. Bittersmith. I appreciate you calling our attention to that and the follow-up also to Dr. Thor's. And while you're on the call then, why don't you take the next, if you have any further comments or questions.
Mrs. Sullivan, can I just make a quick comment?
Yeah, wait a minute, Ms. Bittersmith, excuse me. Yes, Dr. Narini.
In reference to Mrs. Bittersmith's question about Grand Canyon, from a counselor's point of view, I can say that it's resources. They put a lot more resources into their outreach efforts than we're able to, or that any of the other colleges are able to. So just from a resource perspective, from a counselor perspective, and the resources that they're pouring into their outreach efforts, I think that has something to do with their able to skim off a few more students from us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rooney. So back to you, Ms. Bittersmith.
Thank you. That was really my question. And thank you, Dr. Rooney. That's helpful. I had a sense perhaps that advertising maybe works. So that's a good observation. Thank you.
Ms. Bittersmith, do you have any other questions, comments? It's your turn now.
Yeah, I do not. No, I do not. Thank you, President.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bittersmith. Then we'll move to Ms. Smith.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate the report as well. First, I just have a small comment, and that is in the report, I appreciate using peer institutions as a benchmark, which is a helpful way to get a sense of where we are situated and can be used both in all kinds of advocacy, whether it be with lawmakers or funders, to get a sense again of Maricopa. My suggestion is that in some of them where it says, for example, Maricopa is performing above or below, a little more detail about to what extent, how far above or how far below, I think would provide even more clarity to the reader about, again, where we're situated among our peers. And then I'd love to hear from the presenters if out of those trends on the summary page that are noted as trending downward, which one of those are do you put would you highlight with the most urgency, and which of those would you like the board to be most conscious of out of those where we're not necessarily trending in the direction that we desire? Thank you.
Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Fisher.
President Sullivan, I'm moving to the summary page that she was referring to. So in the report, for anybody following along, that's on page 4. Is that correct, Ms. Smith?
Yes, page 4, that's correct.
Okay. Well, you know, the ones that jump out at me in terms of a downward trend, one of those is transfer, of course, head count and persistence and course success rates. Those are obviously tied together. Students' persistence is the measure from moving from one semester to the next, or perhaps 1 year to the next. And if that's on a downward trend, there might be course success rates that are related to that. If they're struggling to pass courses, it would naturally make sense that they may make the decision to not continue on, which ultimately affects and has an impact on our head count. So I see those as being tied together quite well. And then the transfers part, you know, I think that we need to continue to strengthen our relationship with our universities. I think the development and implementation of guided pathways will help. Transfers as a percentage, as pure numbers, until we improve enrollment, we may not see the transfer number increase, but we should really be looking at also our transfer rate. You know, are we seeing a higher percentage of students transferring? I would also weigh that perhaps against the number of certificates and awards. Maybe a student started off with the idea that they might transfer to university someday. Maybe some life decision happened and they decided to move towards something that would get them into the workforce quicker. So maybe we're seeing an uptick in certificates, short-term type of credentials rather than transferring to university. That's a possibility. I would ask the team to dig into that one. Maybe it's you know sufficient enough to move those numbers. So those are my just sort of off the top of my head thoughts around those. Clearly, Dr. Fisher and her team have spent an enormous amount of time digging into this, and our presidents might be able to answer your question as well.
Dr. Fisher?
Certainly, I would concur with the chancellor. You know, when I look at these data, it's the persistence that really is the concern. If what we want is for every student to finish what they start, be that a certificate, a degree, whatever it is that they're here to do, persistence is everything. They have to complete the course to complete the certificate or to complete the degree. So that's the one I would be the most concerned about and want to put resources towards. And I'd open it up to our presidents that are on the presentation team or others as well.
While there are others that are thinking about the response, President Sullivan, Board Member Smith, I think it's really important too that when we dig into these data, the question that I have and that I know many of us think about, and it was in fact discussed here in Dr. Ganther's segment, is who's having struggle persisting from one semester to the next, who's struggling to complete their courses. And we identify trends in that, and it tends to be our students of lower socioeconomic background, it tends to be our students who are first generation, and it tends to be our students of color. And so in Dr. Ganther's comments around addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, that's what she's referring to, is the fact that we are able to determine that there's groups of people that consistently struggle in these areas. And our only way to really improve this across our entire system, given the number of students that we have of color in our system, is to address the heart of that issue. And so there is a concerted effort to improve around our look and view in these areas. And we hope that these numbers will improve as we begin to design programming around these students. I mean, at the end of the day, when we design programs that target these groups of students to provide additional support and services, it's really all of our students that end up benefiting from them. Our Title V grants are a perfect example of those. We receive those grants because we're Hispanic serving institutions, but really all of our students benefit from the programs that we implement as a result of that funding.
Thank you. And to answer Ms. Smith's second question, when it comes to the board, I mean, I understand and appreciate the conversation around persistence. Of course, there's headcount and the transfer piece that you mentioned. But where and how do you follow up in terms of where you feel the board's energy needs to be given the difference in our roles?
As a board member, President Sullivan, my most previous comments would be, as a board, I think you should ask us where specifically are we struggling in these areas, and how can we invest as an organization to improve those areas so that the next time we come back, we see these, return to a green rather than showing back up again as a red.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith, do you have further comment or question?
I would like to just make one more observation, and perhaps it's a bit of a question. On page 16, Chandler Gilbert is highlighted as a spotlight related to completion time. And I appreciate in this last couple of moments us speaking about the connection between persistence and course success rates. And of course, this also relates to how long it takes for folks to complete. Perhaps this would be more of a follow-up, not an answer on the spot. But the question that runs through my mind when I read about this spotlight is I wonder whether the composition of the student body at Chandler Gilbert contributes to the shorter completion time. And perhaps there are less students, for example, that have caregiving responsibilities or who are working full-time, and that's part of why they're able to complete their degree sooner, which would be different from Chandler Gilbert having a different advising model or another type of intervention that the other colleges might want to be mindful of if they too are looking to shorten their time to degree program. And so I was just thinking that as I read the spotlights, I was thinking through, is this a best practice that will be scaled to others, or is this spotlight a result of distinguishing characteristics of that college? And so again, I'm not looking for an immediate response to that question, but giving you a sense of how I received the report. And again, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any other board member who has comment to Ms. Smith's observations or comments?
Ms. Sullivan, if I may.
Oh. Yes, Ms. Munoz.
I don't know who was speaking, but if you'd like to go first, I can wait.
No, you go ahead, hon. It's fine. I'll wait till you're done.
Thank you. Something to consider with Ms. Smith's comment was, I'm not sure specifically what high schools are connected to which community colleges, but I know while I was attending Gilbert High School, doing those dual enrollment classes was connected to Chandler Gilbert. And I know quite a few high schools that were in the area were also connected to Chandler Gilbert. I'm not sure if, Chandler Gilbert does connect, both the Chandler area and Gilbert. So you're then looking at two cities versus Mesa perhaps is only connected to certain schools within Mesa, and so on. So that could be one of the factors also weighing into, why Chandler Gilbert has a higher completion rate time period wise. Because I know, for example, when I was graduating high school, there were some other students, there are always going to be students who are excelling faster than others. And there were some students from my class who only had one more semester and they were done. They already had their associates. So that might be a factor to consider when looking at those numbers.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Ms. Nguyen.
I appreciate Ms. Questions, and I just have a question about the transfer. If people are coming to our college and they're getting whatever certificate or degree and it's complete and they don't transfer, how does that factor into that number? So sometimes people come to our college in order to do 2 years with us and go to another college. Some just come for the 2 years and aren't transferring. Do we have a breakdown of who's enrolling and I realize it takes a 2-year degree may take 4 years, but at the end of that, do we know, is there a breakdown between those two? Does that make, I hope that makes sense.
President Sullivan, Ms. Nguyen, Chancellor Gonzalez, this is Lori Lindenberg, District Director of Institutional Effectiveness again. I don't know that this will be an exact answer to your question. I think we'll have to dig into that just a bit, but that metric actually is calculated in a hierarchy where we look at students in a variety of bins. So they can complete an award or a certificate, and they can also transfer. So the dashboard actually provides you the ability to dig down to see the students that just completed an award, and had transferred, completed a certificate and transferred, and all of those layers of detail. So I believe that we could dig in to see kind of where the largest drops are for you and parse that out.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm going to move on then. Dr. Narini, do you have comments, questions? Your turn.
I do, and I'll try to keep them short because I have many. I appreciate the presentation, and I keep in mind the whole time, stay out of the weeds. So I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds. But I appreciate the presentation. The report is excellent. And I appreciate all the work that's gone in. I really appreciate the outreach and the admissions people and the academic advisors at each of the colleges because they're doing a remarkable job given what they have to work with these days. And I just hope that we as a board can support the efforts of the colleges in terms of persistence and retention, because that's really where the core of this is. I mean, we see that the numbers have gone up in college readiness, so we know the students are ready for college. So where are they falling off the lane? And the research is out there. Kofi and a number of other folks have come up with clever little catchphrases like PERMA. What are we looking for successful students? It's positive emotions, it's engagement into the institution, it's relationships that they have at the institution, it's meaning, finding meaning in what they're doing, and then last they have it as achievement. So with all those other things, it's not their ability to succeed, it's what we as a college are able to help them connect to and stay persistent and show that they have what they're doing has an end goal, and so. And we know, and I know Dr. Gunther and Dr. Gonzalez talks about the diversity issue, and that's very important. And I agree. It's taking these things like what PERMA, like what Kofi and some of these other researchers have done, and then just grooming it to our student populations. Because I see in the report that one of our struggles is with Native American students, and the way Native American students are going to engage in the institution is going to be different than a different student, than an African American student or a white student. And we have to look at where are the Native American students coming from. If most of them are coming from out of the county or out of the area, we have to look at housing, how do they engage in those sort of things. So again, let me back up out of the weeds. Before I jump back in, and we talk about partnerships with the universities, and that's important to give the students the goal to get to where they want to be with the 4-year degrees and with the certificate programs. But we keep, and I brought this up a number of times over the last couple of years, is we forget about the partnerships we have with the high schools. Ms. Munoz had talked about the dual enrollment and that kind of connection, but we need to build that pathway as well. Like, how do we connect with the high school students and high school counselors, the high school teachers, to transition them into the university so that they are ready? I mean, we talk about college readiness just as math and developmental ed classes. So how do we talk about other types of college readiness? Whether it's, college readiness is the FAFSA. Have the students done the FAFSA? Are they ready for the transition from high school to college? And talking about, in that the course that Chandler Gilbert, or I'm sorry, that Estrella Mountain is doing is important, because that helps with the transition. So that's that much less that they have to do, to adjust to as they get to the college and be successful. And I think the other thing we need to encourage and help, and again, I apologize for the weeds, but I do it every single day with the students, getting them to fill out the applications, the paperwork, the dynamic forms, registering for classes. We look at the student page, at the student center page, and it needs to be looked at. It's not easy to navigate for the students. And I would like to have a workshop with the board just to try to register for a class, just to see how much fun that is and how much trouble we have with that. But we need to examine from first contact to exit from the institutions and find out where those little gaps are in it. And I hope as a board we can encourage and we can support the colleges in their efforts to do that, because it's cheaper to keep them than to recruit a new one. We need to support the students who are there, who we know can be successful. And I had some other things, but we'll leave it at that for now. But we really need to look at the Native American students and where the issues are with them, and as we do with all the students of color, and all the low-income first-generation students and at-risk students, and how do we support them? So that's all.
My comment to that would be, there's a lot in what you offered that also ties into Ms. Smith's comment about board priorities and board to-dos. Anyone else have a comment linked to Dr. Narini's comments?
Yes, I do.
Whose I do? Is that you, Mrs. McGrath?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
When Mr. Hendricks was on the board, one of his children wanted to register. And he came to him and told him, "I'm having a hard time." And I think he was registering at Mesa. And so Mr. Hendricks went there with him. It took 3 trips with the student and Mr. Hendricks to get registered. And I was under the impression that the registration process was going to be streamlined and simplified. And from what Dr. Narini said, perhaps that hasn't quite been accomplished so far. And I'd like to see that happen.
It's improved a great deal, for sure. But there's still some glitches that we can kind of smooth out. Some of the rough edges we can still smooth out.
So duly noted on that. Any other comment before I move to Mrs. McGrath for her overarching comments or questions?
President Sullivan, this is Susan
Yes.
Bittersmith. I just want to echo Dr. Narini's comments about the dual enrollment precedents and tracking how those dual enrollers then proceed, where they go directly with those credits into four-year institutions, or coming to us first and then to four-year institutions. I don't want to belabor that, but I think he made excellent points that I would certainly concur with.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments on his comments? Their comments, questions? Being none, I'm going to move forward. Mrs. McGrath, do you have any other big comments or questions related to this?
Yes, I did.
Good, go ahead.
I was very pleased to hear Dr. Rivera's comment about this getting ready to and be successful class, but I was very alarmed that he is considering making it mandatory. More than half, a great percentage of our students work full-time or part-time, and they don't have time to take extra classes, especially extra classes that don't count towards their degree. In fact, they take a long time to get through because they have so little time for classes. And I admire here's a class to get you successful, but I really don't like the idea of making it mandatory, because it's difficult enough for our students to get through school without making them take a class that doesn't count. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that, Dr. Rivera or anyone else?
President Sullivan, Chancellor Gonzalez, and board member,
It's all right. Just say board members.
Yes,
We're
board
good.
members. Yes, I do want to just quickly elaborate on the pilot. We are planning to target 700.
Please, Ms. Sullivan, who's speaking?
This is President Rivera at Estrella Mountain.
Go ahead, Dr. Rivera. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So I just want to clarify. It's a pilot for 700 students in this fall, and we're targeting full-time students. Knowing that, looking at the best practices for guided pathways, that students that tend to have the success course early on tend to take more hours and have better retention and success rates. So, we are looking at Maricopa funds to be able to utilize so that it's nearly cost-free for the students. And if not, we are going to utilize foundation funds. But it is a pilot, and we want to see whether or not this course makes a difference. And so we understand certainly the concerns of the governing board, but I can certainly have VP Cardenas-Adama, who's the Vice President of Student Affairs at Estrella Mountain, provide more detail to the board in a follow-up email.
Thank you. I believe that would work, and certainly following any data that comes out as a result of your pilot would be good. Mrs. McGrath, do you have any other comments or questions along that line?
Thank you. No.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes, Dr. Nuri.
Along those lines, as we're talking about dual enrollment and some of the work that I've been doing, my day job, is trying to incorporate a class like that as part of dual enrollment, so the students can get that in high school as they prepare for college, and they can use that. It'll be a dual enrollment. It can be a dual enrollment class, or even a concurrent enrollment class, so we can work with the students in high school to prepare them for college, to make them understand the vocabulary, the lexicon of and the ins and outs. But even exploring that, I know I've explored it with Phoenix Union. And we've talked about how that could be a possibility as a dual enrollment class, so that students don't waste any time. They're in high school, they're in the class already, and it'll be an elective for high school and an elective for the college, but it'll give them the information that they need to be successful.
Thank you. Board members, you've all asked questions or made comments of areas that were of interest to you. I want to comment and you know what? Ms. Munoz, what do you have for us on this?
For most, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who put it together, but also to the former students who did give a little bit about kind of their experience and how it was. I think that there is a lot of different contributing factors as to whether a student transfer, whether a student does it or not. And I think a huge factor that was brought up quite a few times was money. And I think that's always going to be a factor. I think Maricopa does a fabulous job at trying to provide as many scholarships as you can. But I really think that a big factor for transferring students would be sort of that financial help when transferring to a university. I know it's a lot easier going to a community college because it is smaller. It is kind of that in between stage of high school and university, and I think it's a very smooth transition, which is why it's so great to many students, including myself. However, I think that financial assistance is that huge factor that weighs in as to whether a student is going to transfer to a university or whether that they are just going to get that certificate, to get into the workforce, or, just that associates, just because it will always be a contributing factor. So I'm not sure who particularly this may go to regarding my next comment, but perhaps looking into partnering more with the different universities in state with those assistance programs of transferring in. I myself, am very grateful that I have a lot of support system. I know Leah Thompson, our former Emcc student body president, she herself, who transferred to ASU, is the one who has been reaching out to me regarding scholarships transferring into ASU. And she is a former student at MCC. So I think if we find, kind of that smooth transition as well regarding, helping students with financial assistance, that would be a huge contributing factor.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. So before I close out this discussion, is there any other comment or question from board members? Doesn't sound as if there are any at this time. I'd like to address this to you specifically, Dr. Fisher, and that is, we certainly appreciate the efforts that you put into this report and also with your team. I fully understand that. And the consideration that you gave to the comments that we initiated last year about presenting the monitoring issues in a different manner than what had been done in the past, to give us both a significant picture of where we've been, but certainly giving us a bit of a roadmap as to where we need to go. And to, again, Ms. Smith's observation and the others that I believe are aligned, it helps the board understand as different issues are presented to us, where we do want to put our attention, our interests, our resources, our investments, so that we can assure that we're constantly trending up as opposed to looking at trending down in these categories. The other thing I'd like to say is it certainly appears as if not just did you accomplish this, but you were consciously and conscientiously listening to us as board members, and certainly that indicates a good partnership between the two, where we can offer comment and as to what we might need for quality decision making, and how you use what you know and you see to lead us to those shared interests and commitments. I believe this may be the last meeting that we will have a opportunity to talk and work with you. And again, I want to compliment you on not just this effort, but all the efforts that you've made throughout your years with the community college, and express our best wishes and support for you in the future. So with that, board members, I think unless you have further comment, this would conclude this section of our work session this afternoon, with the recognition that we will use this monitoring report as another tool for us as we go about our business of ensuring policies and resources to contribute to Maricopa Community College District being the best in the United States. Any other comments? Dr. Gonzalez, then I think, do you have any comment to close out this part of the session?
I would thank you, President Sullivan, members of the board, for your insight and your questions and your feedback. It's greatly appreciated. We look forward to continuing this good work and coming back again next year and hopefully seeing some improvement in these numbers. And I want to again thank the faculty, staff, and the administration across the district for helping make all of this possible. Your good work has not gone unnoticed, and so thank you. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. And it may behoove us, as we learn or have updates on guided pathways and other initiatives and activities, to bring us along with this monitoring report as things are uncovered, or so we can have discussions not just once a year, but in a more ongoing manner, to make sure that we're all following the same trajectory. That would be my last comment on that. So with that, board members, I'm going to give us 1 minute break. So put yourself on mute, and I will come back to us in about a minute, and we'll move into the discussion, if any, on the budget. So I have 5:44 on my computer right now. I'll be back to you in about 5:46. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for that brief interlude there. And with that, I would like to move us into a continuation and more or less question and answer discussion on the fiscal year 21-22 budget development update, revenue and expenditures by fund, which we did receive last Tuesday evening. And the presentation was thorough and certainly was presented in for a majority of the hour that we had together. Didn't leave a lot of time for board members to engage in questions and answers or any discussion. So we agreed we would review the budget presentation and come back for that Q&A and discussion. So with that, I'm probably going, well, not probably, I am going to follow the same format we just did for the previous presentation. And that is, I'll go down through each board member asking if you have any comments or questions. That will then frame whatever exchange we may want to have, building on those as board members with the presenters. I want to make note that all board members are present for this discussion right now, and also Ms. Munoz, our student advisor, or student trustee. So with that, Dr. Gonzalez, I'm going to move to you once again, and then we'll move into the Q&A.
Thank you, President Sullivan, members of the board, CEC and guests. Again, moving into the budget development work session follow-up. Last week you had a presentation from Dr. Moore, Dr. Dale, Mr. Iquinto, and Ms. Granillo. And then it was the fairly typical report out and request in terms of its format. And one of the things that I would add that was different and we thought might be helpful is thinking about the future and Maricopa's future, and if we were to invest additional dollars, where might those dollars go? And you saw ideas and areas that sort of align back to our improvement in some of the key areas that we just came out of learning about in terms of the monitoring report. So I want you to be mindful that there's a connection between those two things, but you know that's a part of it. The rest of it is the here and now and a budget that is necessary to get us through the next fiscal year. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Moore and his team to be available for any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. I do want to, before we move into that, one of the things we had discussed is perhaps board members could offer their inquiries prior to today's meeting. And we will go through, again, each board member and their questions, but I know that there were a few that were sent to you directly in the finance office, Dr. Moore. And so why don't we tackle those first before we go back through board members for their individual comments or questions. And I expect that you have those in front of you. So are you ready to take it away in responding to those?
Yes, our team is ready. And thank you for giving us some advanced questions. Some documents were sent to the board. A number of documents, mostly centering around capital needs and surveys of facility issues and how those would be played out. And I realized that we gave the board a lot of information last week. You know, we kind of reviewed the theme of our budget, which is a balanced budget and a safety net of 16% operating revenue, and assumptions about new revenue and in building this budget, and assumptions about our expenditures for next year, which included a 3% reduction, and you know the fact that future budgets will lead to a structurally balanced budget. We talked about the inflationary gap, which I later led into a compensation proposal or a COLA, and how that would be funded to try to close that gap, you know, for the district and help us remain competitive in our search for the best and the brightest employees. We also get a high-level overview of CARISA, which is the CARES 2 monies, and we're sorting through how that can be applied to the opportunities before us. And then again, the capital needs and expenditure limitations. So that was an awful lot to drop in an hour. But Gary has sent out a number of documents. And Gary, do you want to review those documents or just entertain questions based on the summary that's in those documents?
May I interrupt, Gary, one moment? I think what would be helpful is for you to talk to the questions that were asked online. Most of them referred to capital expenditures and I believe deferred maintenance, and address those answers so the board can hear those collectively, please.
Yeah, let me go ahead. President Sullivan, members of the board, Chancellor Gonzalez, colleagues and guests, I'm Gary Yaquinto, the Chief Financial Officer for the district. And I do have to begin with the documents, 2 documents that we had sent out in response to questions about capital that board member Bittersmith brought up last Tuesday, dealing with the capital budget. And then President Sullivan, you had asked about the deferred maintenance projects that have been identified by our consultant a couple of years ago. So the 2 documents that were sent out provide answers to those questions concerning the numbers of projects and the cost of those projects. And you can see that in the deferred maintenance line on the slide that is up on the screen right now, that we are increasing, and we believe that we can accelerate our deferred maintenance programs by some $7 million over what has been budgeted for this year to $28 million. And as a result, our total capital budget will increase a little bit from $67.6 million to $79.8 million in fiscal year 21-22. And this is an area that we believe is extremely important and one for which we do not have a continuing source of ongoing revenue. And part and parcel to our capital recommendations for this year and beyond is to continue the shift from the secondary property tax as we pay down the 2004 bond issues to the primary property tax rate, and to dedicate that additional amount to capital. And it's important that I believe it's important that the board moves in this direction and continues that tax shift, as we have committed that we will try our best to meet our capital needs without having to go out for another bond issue, at least at the present time. That addresses, I think, the questions that were raised last week. Now, President Sullivan, I have to admit that I'm at a little bit of a loss with respect to questions that were sent via email. I have not seen any directly, nor am I aware that any had gotten through to anyone either in the fiscal office or in Dr. Moore's office. So I'd be happy to, while I don't have those questions that may have been sent in front of me, certainly our team here is ready to answer any of those questions.
Okay, thank you. They were not supposed to be sent to all board members if they came. So what I'll do then is just go through and ask people if they have any comments or questions. And then I think that will solve that for us. But in terms of the information you provided around capital expenditures and deferred maintenance summary, let's first start there. Board members, do you have any comments or questions about either of those 2 items?
President Sullivan.
Yes, Ms. Bittersmith.
I just wanted to thank Gary for responding to my questions from the last meeting. I appreciate it, very helpful, and I do concur with the philosophy of making sure we can handle what we need to handle without going out for additional revenues from taxpayers. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Bittersmith. Any other comments or questions on these items that are in front of us right now? Capital expenditures, deferred maintenance.
I just have a brief question. This is
Ms.
Mrs.
Nguyen.
It looks to me like any capital expenditures that we have, there says emergency maintenance, but I know that we had some roofing issues and some of our buildings are really old. Do we have a reserve fund for unanticipated maintenance issues?
And President Sullivan, Mrs. Nguyen, we do carry a balance that can be used in emergency situations. And so that would be our reserve. But over time, that balance without replenishment through the tax shift will decline. So while we can handle things today, given our reserve, our balance, that over time we're going to need additional infusions of dollars into the capital fund to be able to maintain a safety net for those emergencies as they come up.
And do we have a plan for, sorry, follow-up question, do we have a plan for how we would get those capital infusions? And have we thought about, is that going to be a tax ask, or is it, because that's unfortunately, we've had some really unexpected repairs that we had to make in the few years I've been on the board, and I can't see that that's going to change.
And President Sullivan, Mrs. Nguyen, I think that's correct. We will continue to have those, and we do have a slide, and I'm looking at it. We'll bring it up on the screen here in a minute. It is slide 29. And again, this slide relates to what I had mentioned earlier, and that is shifting as we pay down our 2004 bond, principal and interest, we shift a portion of that tax reduction from the secondary property tax to the primary tax rate, and then dedicate that proceed, if you will, to the capital projects. So that would be the source of continuing revenue that we would hope the board would approve. And as you can see, if that shift is approved over time, looking at the second line, the second line where it says decrease, you can see that over time, in the one below it, proposed tax shift, that we will generate some $75 million worth of additional ongoing revenue that will continue even beyond FY 27 and 28. And we believe that with that tax shift and the additional dollars that will be generated, we'll be able to, number one, continue to accelerate our deferred maintenance program and meet the capital needs of the district without having to go out for another bond issue, at least as we see it today.
Thank you.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes, Dr. Thor.
I just want to comment on the tax shift issue, and I've said similar things before. But when the board first made the decision to do this tax shift, I believe it was in 2017, we did so with the intent to avoid having to go out for a general obligation bond. So it makes me uncomfortable that we continue to have this question put before us each year about whether we want to do it. And perhaps whether it's the policy committee or the administration, perhaps they could look at some way that the board through policy or resolution can indicate our intention until we complete the bond program to do this shift so that the budget planning can have a little more certainty to it than it does right now?
Thank you. Good idea. So we'll take a look at that as an option. Any other comments from you on that, and anyone or anyone else?
No.
Thank you for that suggestion. And all right, so moving on then, what I'm going to do is what we did last time is I'll go through each board member for the broader, perhaps, discussion on budget. There may be lots of questions, there may be none, but this is our opportunity to respond to what we heard at the last work session. So with that, I'm going to start at the other end. Ms. Bittersmith.
President Sullivan, no. Thank you again for the earlier answers to my questions from last week.
You're welcome. And thank you to the Finance Office. Mrs. McGrath.
Oh, thank you. I have a question on this line that says energy and water projects, operating reduction costs. I'd like a more detailed explanation of what's involved there.
And President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, Gary Eberhard, who is our Director of Facilities Planning and Development, is in the meeting, and he should be able to answer your questions with some level of detail. So I'd turn to Gary. Gary, would you please answer Mrs. McGrath's question?
Thank you, Gary. Yes, this is Gary Eberhard, District Director of Facilities Planning and Development. Thank you for the question. President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, that particular line item is what we utilize for, say, our LED lighting program. You know, we've been converting all of our lighting across the district. All of our parking lot lighting, exterior lighting, has been successfully converted to LED. We are about 70 to 80% complete with all of our interior lighting conversions, old fluorescent tubes to LED technologies. We're also looking at water programs, such as converting our irrigation pumps to more energy efficient irrigation systems. Smart systems, if you will. So that particular line item is used for those types of opportunities that we see across the district.
How many of these pumps do we have? What are we talking about here when you say irrigation pumps? Do we have one on every campus, several on every campus, one on half the campuses? What are you talking about here?
President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, I don't have a specific number for you at hand. We could certainly look into that. However, it's site specific, it's college specific. Obviously, it depends on the size of the college. We have more than one, if you will, at each college. We have several, actually. Every building, for instance, if there is landscaping in and around a particular building on a campus, they're going to have they will have that zoned, if you will, for that particular facility. So you could get into a significant number of these irrigation pumps, depending on the size of the campus, the number of the facilities, how much landscaping exists in and around each facility, etc.
Are these pumps that pump from our wells, or do they pump from an irrigation source such as a canal? Where do these pumps operate?
President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, it's a variety of things. Scottsdale Community College is as you know, is our only college that actually has access to the well. So they, those pumps are tied into that system. There is also at South Mountain, there's an opportunity that's been pursued here lately to tap into the canal water adjacent to the campus there, because we have the canal running right along the edge of the campus. And it depends on the site specific location. The other colleges for the most part are tapped into the city water.
Thank you. I'm baffled that you're going to be planning to use canal water down at South Mountain. Every bit of water that's put in that canal has already been spoken for. It's not there unless it's been ordered. So are we going to be able to be in a position to buy some of that water?
President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, we've actually been looking into that, and there is availability of water to our knowledge, if you will, to access some of the water off of that canal. I don't know the exact quantity, my apologies, but we have been through South Mountain's efforts, we've been able to, again, utilize a portion of that water to supplement the irrigation needs on the South Mountain campus.
Mrs.
I'd be interested in knowing whose water we're going to be buying and what water is pumped into that canal. Is that a Roosevelt Irrigation District canal?
President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, my apologies, I don't have that information offhand. I can certainly find out for you, but I don't have the specifics as far as what irrigation system or canal that is being tapped from ultimately, other than what is right there adjacent to the college.
And President Sullivan, Mrs. McGrath, yes. Gary Yaquinto again, and yes. There has been a lot of work done with respect to the South Mountain project, so we can come back and get very specific with respect to the questions that Mrs. McGrath is asking, and be happy to provide those answers to the board.
Okay, perhaps that you could do a off meeting Q&A together, and then we can benefit from the answers. But I'm going to move us off that question. Mrs. McGrath, do you have any other questions or comments about the budget presentation from last week?
No, I'm just glad that we're going to be reducing the budget and looking forward to that, because the taxpayers are greatly burdened with our costs. And I know we try hard, but I'm glad to hear we're reducing it this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McGrath. Moving on then, Dr. Narini.
Thank you. Just really quickly, I think it's on page 20 about the COLA. I know we've got it spelled out how we're going to fund the COLA for 21-22 fiscal year. Is there any plans for how we're going to fund a COLA in the future?
And President Sullivan, Dr. Narini, I think I caught your question, although the sound was a little weak. I think you had asked for plans of funding compensation into the future. And yes, I mean, there are plans that are being developed by the Human Resources Division to do just that. And my understanding is that we will be back in March to present that plan.
Good, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Okay, thank you. And by adopting the compensation philosophy, certainly that was an element of that. And I believe that's why the plan is being developed for the sustainability factor that's tied to the compensation philosophy that would in fact include the COLA. So we'll look forward to that presentation in March, perhaps an early March work session, so we are more confident as we move into the final stages of budget. Thank you, Dr. Narini. Ms. Smith.
I have no additional questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Thor?
Last time I did ask a question about why Scottsdale had no expenses under the institutional portion of the CARES Act. And we all received a very comprehensive answer from the administration of Scottsdale. So thank you very much for that. Just 2 comments. I was certainly very pleased to see that we had moved off a 3% across the board budget reduction to recognizing the differences between the colleges and adjusting the percentage that each college had to contribute, which allows us to avoid worsening the budget inequities that already exist in the district. So thank you for that. And thank you also for the very creative thinking that you did around how to fund the COLA, as well as the postponing of some transfers and creative use of the Prop 207 and Prop 301 funds. I very much appreciate you following up on some of the comments that I made quite a while ago and incorporating them into this budget. So good job.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. Ms. Nguyen.
I think I'm good for right now. I just want to just underline this point with the deferred maintenance, because it's 58% of the total expenditures. And so I'm hoping that we're getting to a place and a time where it's such a large part of our budget, and it takes away from other things that we could be doing to develop programs and other things. And I don't know how we get around that, but just long term, we're increasing our expenditures from this fiscal year to next fiscal year at a time when our enrollment is down. So I feel like we're getting a double hit. And I would just ask Mr. Yaquinto if he could, as we go into, let's see, 22, 23, I know that that's not on here and we're only looking at the short term, but is it going to keep going up as our subtotal of expenditures in the top category, or do we know beyond this? Because it's a trend that I'm just having concern about. So and then I'll leave it at that. And I do appreciate the COLA also. I think it's long overdue. So
thank you, President Sullivan, Mrs. Nguyen. I think we're at the level that we're proposing this year for deferred maintenance at the top of what we think we can do. The difficulty, of course, is that our consultant has identified $380 million worth of maintenance projects that we have failed to undertake, that we need to rectify over a period of time. And we are trying to bite it off into chunks that we can actually do and carry out. But of course, it's still going to take us a number of years to complete all the projects. And in the meantime, those projects that we cured early in the program are now reaching an age, 10 years down the road where they may need to be rehabilitated again. So, we'll do our best to manage the projects, to gain whatever efficiencies we can gain by combining projects and realizing some economies of scale and carrying these out on our campuses. But I hear what you're saying, and it's an area that we'll be watching very closely.
I just, with all the efforts being made by the colleges to cut the 3%, and a lot of effort's been gone into this, I just think it's like the wolf at the door, if you will. And obviously, when you have this many buildings and as many campuses we do, it's an ongoing concern. I just don't know. I'm just concerned because we haven't been on our campuses, and I almost think things out that you see, and because we've kind of been dormant for almost a year, I almost think that makes things worse. So I would love to know, and I don't need it tonight, obviously, but in the next month or so before March, if we could get what maybe the next 2 years projected in terms of that is, so we know what we're looking at, so we don't get a surprise. And I so appreciate the work that you've done on this. So thank you very much.
And thank you. We'd be happy to get that information to you.
Thank you. Ms. Munoz, do you have any comments or questions?
Mine are just pretty similar to Ms. Nguyen, kind of reiterating that. Just, I think taking a step back and examining where the budgeting is going, just because right now COVID is still a situation. You know, it's something that we thought maybe a semester was going to go by and that was it, and we were going to go back to class, and then we just hit another semester. So, you know, I think we have to adapt as things happen, obviously. But right now, I know personally from speaking to students, there are a lot of students who are suffering financially, whether it is themselves or their families. So if that money is something that can be, you know, put to better use, you know, I think we need to focus on the now, what is needed right now. I know those are those things that will be needed in the future, but I think focusing on the right now, what's happening currently is huge. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz, and certainly something that we try to pay attention to, and I know is being considered in the budgeting process. And when we talk about student success and the foundation, those are issues top of mind. How do we address some of those concerns and the financial needs and status of our students? So it all kind of works together. My comment would be, thank you for the time again that you've taken in putting this forward. I particularly appreciate the COLA integration, and I think the compensation philosophy perspective is going to be a significant contribution to how we look at budgeting, along with the ideas around sustainability on capital projects and deferred maintenance, to Ms. Nguyen and Ms. Munoz's point. But certainly the more stability we can get into building budgets, so we don't have to guess every year on particular points, to Dr. Thor's comment about the policy or resolution around the tax shift concept that we adopted, or the board adopted in 2017, and the other elements that can be, I don't want to say standardized, but certainly provide equity and attention to our priorities are critical. So thank you for your attention to that. And certainly the next reiteration comes when, Mr. Yaquinto, when are we looking at the next work session on this?
President Sullivan, the plan is to come back in March as with another work session. Hopefully we can schedule that in advance of the regular board meeting toward the end of March, and then we will be back. Hopefully we will have most everything nailed down as a result of that meeting in March, and then we would come forward with a budget for first read in April.
Perfect. Okay. So we won't be scrambling like we did last year, due to unforeseen circumstances, certainly. But so we'll be ready then for a second read, perhaps in early May, after our first read in April. Is that what I'm understanding? So we can meet deadlines and others? Okay, perfect. And as the board generates other questions, certainly if they need to be answered online initially before our work session, that would be fair to submit them. But any comment on those, Mr. Quinto and Dr. Moore, as you know, the answers would go out to all board members to keep us current and up to date. So with that, thank you very much. And Dr. Gonzalez, any concluding comments?
President Sullivan, members of the board, again, thank you for the opportunity to provide this opportunity to you to ask any questions and provide additional feedback. I think piggybacking on what you said about ensuring a smooth transition into the budgeting process, the work sessions that we previously had will pay the dividends so that we can, not have so much backing up at the very end and we're running around trying to make this happen so quickly. So thank you.
Sure. So I am going to conclude the work session and again express my appreciation to Dr. Moore and your team on this, and Gary and your team. Board members, again, we have to make a transition online to the next documents. So I'm going to suggest we put ourselves on mute for another couple minutes here, and then we'll move into the special meeting. So I'll be back at 6:21. I know that we're all eager to end a very long day. However, what's coming up is important, and as a first read. So I'm going to put us on mute for a couple minutes, and I'll be right back. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back. Thank you.